hit record. We thought we had it covered. Okay, I apologize about. Yes,
Oh
and for
no,
everybody,
no.
for everyone's
It,
awareness, we are recording. Sorry about that.
yeah,
Go ahead.
and in fact, I look at this as being kind of a informal presentation. So please don't hesitate to break in along the way if there's anything. I know we all have a question period at the end, but if there's something you'd like to know about immediately, please don't hesitate. So I'll go ahead and share my screen, and I'll just confirm that everybody can see it okay. All right, Danielle, you can see that okay? Is that coming across all right, Danielle?
That's good. That's good,
All right,
Tom.
great.
Thomas.
So the title of the presentation today is, really, as I mentioned, this kind of pie in the sky. Will hydrogen be the next fuel for eVTOL? And we're pretty excited about this application as well as others, in the aviation and aerospace world. And before I jump into that, though, I'd like to give a little bit of background on Plug Power, because Plug is really focused on an entire ecosystem of hydrogen. And we're labeling ourselves a hydrogen ecosystem company. And I think our numbers kind of support that statement. Our headquarters is in Latham, New York. Plug Power was established in 1997. So it's been in the business for a long time, focusing on hydrogen fuel cell applications and hydrogen. We have a 38% compound annual growth rate, between 2013 and 20. So the company is growing. I show here we've got 1,400 full-time employees, but adding in contractors and so on, I think it's getting up towards 1,700 people, which are supporting the effort. We've got systems, in operation right now, and I think, the fact that we have 47,000 fuel cell systems deployed in actual operating environments in the customer's hands, again, that's a number that speaks for itself. We've had over 41 million fuelings, and as of today, Plug Power's customers are the largest users of liquid hydrogen at over 40 tons a day, and that's even more than NASA would even consider using. So, as I mentioned, it's really all about building this ecosystem for hydrogen, and with the material handling application, Plug was really the first company to take fuel cells to commercial success, bringing this new technology into the hands of real customers, bringing efficiency gains to the business and providing, cost savings at the end of the day. So, that we were able to claim that we're really the first to create a market for this technology. Along with that, we envision this hydrogen highway, developing over the next number of years out to 2024, 2025, installing 6 green hydrogen plants in the US. And by 2025, being able to produce 500 tons per day. And by 2028, 1,000 tons per day of green, renewable liquid hydrogen. Along with that, to support our scaling effort is a gigafactory, which is being developed and should be online by the end of this year in Rochester, New York. And I'll talk a little bit about that later. Our goal is, to really commercialize applications both in the stationary and transportation markets, and of course, aerospace and aviation is one of those key markets for Plug Power. We have some key customers, and our pedestal customers are namely, based on our backbone technology, the material handling application, and these customers are Amazon and Walmart, Home Depot. They use our fuel cell systems in material handling systems like forklifts and pallet jacks in their distribution centers. And this is another ecosystem, another example of an ecosystem that Plug Power has developed. It's given companies like Amazon and Walmart the opportunity again to move goods more efficiently and to save money. And we're expanding our customer base quickly, not only in the material handling area, but across the board. Plug Power has established 4 new business units, those business units being energy, green renewable hydrogen, electrolyzers, so producing electrolyzers which produce the green renewable hydrogen, our base material handling business, and new markets, which would include transportation and stationary applications, as well as aerospace. So we're rapidly expanding in Europe. We just opened up a German center for the business, and that'll really drive a lot of the European activity going forward. So not only fuel cells, but refueling stations. And this is a critical part of the operation, being able to provide and refuel the systems that are in operation. And a lot of this aligns with the material handling business, in Amazon and Walmart and Home Depot distribution centers, but it also supports stationary power sites, which are telecom backup systems and so on. So it gives you an idea of, the fact that Plug Power is already, one of the largest networks of hydrogen refueling stations. So we see this expanding to other applications, to other opportunities. And part of that may be towards airports and aviation. So back, to kind of focus a little more on aerospace now and some of our experience specifically to do with aerospace. Of course, we started on a smaller scale, and we've been at this for a while. Plug Power has experience in drone activity, smaller scale systems below 1 kilowatts in fixed wing aircraft. We worked at the beginning with third-party integrators who built the airframe, and then we even basically kind of learned about it ourselves and developed our own fixed wing aircraft, and were able to achieve, things like a 10-hour endurance flight. And in 2015, we saw an opportunity in the multi-rotor market. We saw various developers coming online and seeing this business opportunity. So we were the world's first company to ever integrate fuel cell systems into multi-rotor aircraft. And at the time, we realized, how critical weight was to this kind of aircraft. So by moving forward, we were able to reduce weight. And in 2015, we also performed the longest multi-rotor flight at the time of 3 hours, 43 minutes. These are just technology demonstrators. That it's understood that these activities weren't necessarily to do something necessarily that useful other than just fly a long time. So, but it was a starting point for us. And we realized that the fundamental technology had a real opportunity to move not only into other drone applications, but into larger scale aerospace as well. In 2017, we were actually the first company to ever fly an eVTOL UAV. So this is a Kestrel design, and we're able to take off vertically and take advantage of the lifting surfaces of the fixed wing to fly more efficiently. So, we see this as, a real opportunity from an endurance perspective and a range perspective, this kind of aircraft, which aligns with our eVTOL activities here as well. So some of our specific strengths in aerospace, aerospace, other than the drone activity, is a relatively new activity for Plug Power. And over the last 2.5 years, we've kind of developed a design center. And this design center located in Montreal is really the focal point for a lot of the aerospace activity. That said, we rely a lot on the technology development that's happening across the board at Plug Power in Latham, in Spokane, and in Rochester. But the activity here in Montreal is really, culminating all the aerospace efforts and basically, pulling the technology that's needed for each application and each platform. So we really lead the overall system level requirement development and project coordination right across Plug Power. And being in Montreal is a good thing because we're in one of the largest aerospace centers in the world, the third or fourth. And, we have access to, key talent here as well as development facilities, which normally wouldn't be available. So starting with the drone activity, we've developed some fairly specific and significant expertise in hybrid fuel cell battery systems for aerospace applications. And even though the drone system is smaller, we believe the fundamental engineering scales well to eVTOL platforms and even beyond, up to, what we're doing with universal hydrogen, up to large megawatt scale power plants. So we've, worked a long time to reduce weight of a lot of our smaller systems. And we realize that same activity has to happen for larger scale systems as well. And part of that weight is power conditioning. And we realized the best thing, or the best way to remove the weight of something, or to reduce the weight of something, is to actually remove the component. So this is something we work very hard at, is trying to figure out how to reduce things like DC-DC converters, which would, allow us to match voltages between the fuel cell stack and the battery pack. So we have some intellectual property that we've developed to allow, the fuel cell and battery to load share, without a big heavy DC-DC converter. And we've also figured out how to charge the batteries while in flight, again, with, a very efficient method. So that whole philosophy of trying to reduce weight and innovating and trying new things is really, really important to plug. And one thing we've realized is, there's a lot of people who know a lot about fuel cells, and there's a lot of people who know a lot about aerospace and aviation, but there's not too many people who know about fuel cells and aviation. And moving that forward, we think that there's a real opportunity to innovate by bringing these two technologies together, ideally for the first time. There's a lot of development and a lot of technical challenges to overcome, but we also think there's a huge opportunity for innovation and coming up with some amazing ideas to move all of this forward. We're also trying to be actively engaged in standard development and starting, we're involved with the IEC standards for, drone applications, for drone fuel cell applications. But obviously, as we move forward, there'll be a lot of effort in this area across the board for larger scale platforms as well. And we plan to stay involved. So ProGen engine, this is, really the backbone of our transportation, business, this line of engines that we've developed. And it goes from 15 kilowatts all the way up to, the building block of 125 kilowatts, which is used in larger scale stationary power plants up and over and above 1 megawatt. So this is, a turnkey solution, completely engineered with, the fuel cell stack and the balance of plant integrated into this unit, which could be mounted into a vehicle. So this is kind of the approach taken for the on-road transportation application. But we realize also that typically something developed for an on-road transportation application is too heavy for aerospace. So we've started, the activity now to understand how this on-road transportation system could be transformed into aerospace applications. And of course, the first place to start is this fuel cell stack. So we're looking at opportunities at this level first, to really reduce weight. And we've got a really great path forward. We're taking, the stainless steel stack that's used in the ProGen 125 kilowatt engine and converting it to titanium plates. And by doing that, we can bring just the stack, so it would be considered, 145 kilowatts gross. We're bringing the weight of that stack down below 50 kilos, which we think is leading in an industry perspective. Now, we also know that that's just a starting point. It's not just the stack we have to worry about. There's all the balance of plant, there's all the nuts and bolts, there's the coolant, there's everything. So we're really trying to attack this from a systems level. And we know how important it is to reduce the weight of everything, not just the stack. But with that said, we think, the stack is a very good starting point. So the stack you see here off to the right-hand side, it's not just the bipolar plates that we're trying to reduce the mass of. It's the end plates, it's the compression system, it's the actual unit cell, the MEA, the gas diffusion layers inside. We're really taking a holistic approach to the whole thing, looking for opportunities to reduce weight across the board. With that in mind, I kind of wanted to look at a specific example. And we think there's a real value proposition for fuel cell battery hybrid systems for eVTOL aircraft applications. And the reason why is the fact that we can extend the range in a more weight efficient manner by adding fuel and fuel storage. Another aspect is fast refueling compared to battery charging. So we'll take a look at that as well. And of course, last but not least, the zero emission aspect is obviously pretty important. So we take advantage of the two strengths of the two different technologies: fuel cell systems for high specific energy, so energy per unit mass, and this gives us longer endurance. We take advantage of the high specific power of lithium ion or lithium polymer batteries, and this is power per unit mass, and this is important for takeoff and transition. So we believe that with this hybrid approach, we can provide between 2 and 6 times more energy on board than for the pure battery case. And of course, as we'll see in a minute, you know, the aircraft has to be able to carry some weight in the first place. So if the aircraft is designed not to do that, if it's designed to only fly for 20 minutes, then I'll show you that batteries actually make more sense for that scenario. But if endurance is important, this is where we think there's an opportunity here. So what I put together was kind of a generic power profile, and this is generic. It's not aligned with anyone's platform specifically. The idea is, you know, there'd be a takeoff and landing, and that would be in the range of about 450 kilowatts for about a minute in duration. There'd be a transition period as you transition from, you know, the vertical takeoff to, you know, straight and level flight. And that transition would take about 300 kilowatts, and that would be for a minute. And then cruise power would be 150 kilowatts for the remainder of the flight. So I factored in the 10% energy reserve too. And I wanted to consider 2 different scenarios of something of reasonable flight time: an hour flight time, which would require 165 kilowatt hours of total energy, and then 1.5 hour flight, which would be about 240 kilowatt hours. So the assumptions made here are, you know, there's a little bit of hand waving going on here, but, you know, some of these assumptions I think align with reality. Is for the pure battery case that I'll compare, I assumed an overall pack level specific energy of 170 kilowatt hours per kilogram, which I think in some cases is generous, you know, once you add the harness and the support structure and so on. For the hybrid battery case, the hybrid, you know, fuel cell battery case, that the hybrid batteries on board are not light. They have to be able to deliver very high C rates of power. So what that means is that they're not the lightest on the market. They have very stiff voltages, and you can pull a lot of power. So C rates, you know, upwards towards 15 C. So I assume that the specific energy of these packs would be less, around 125 watt hours per kilogram. The battery charging times that I'm going to show you for this comparison are based on the Tesla supercharger. So, you know, 85 kilowatts in about 75 minutes to get the 100% full charge. And we know we can put a lot of energy quickly into these batteries, but to be able to take off with an aircraft, you need the batteries to be at 100%. So you can't just fill them to 75%, you know, in a short period of time. You really need them to be full. So that's also the philosophy here. And then the hydrogen fill times as a comparison, we can fill tanks with gaseous hydrogen at about 1 kilogram per minute. And for gaseous hydrogen and for liquid hydrogen, it's a little bit slower because the tanks have to be pre-chilled. So the assumption there is about 0.5 kilograms per minute. So that's the basis of the analysis that I'll show you, and some of the assumptions as well. So this is the first profile, and I understand it's simplified, but what I wanted to show is kind of, you know, an estimated profile of what an eVTOL aircraft might see as it takes off. So you can see on the left-hand side, there's a 450 kilowatt takeoff for a minute. There's a 300 kilowatt transition. And then the rest of the flight is, you know, 150 kilowatts as it flies through the air. And then when it gets to the end, it transitions and lands. So you see, you know, it's basically a mirror image of the takeoff and the landing. And I know it's oversimplified, but for the purposes of the analysis and the discussion today, I wanted to keep it relatively simple. So that's a 1 hour flight. And that comes in about 165 kilowatt hours. So the 1.5 hour flight, exactly the same thing, just a longer cruise time. And this, you can see that the amount of energy on board required is around 240 kilowatt hours. So back to hybridization, I think that the fact that you're not going to try to build a fuel cell system to provide the maximum power of 450 kilowatts is very important, because as you saw during the takeoff and the landing, it's just for a very short period of time. So if you can rely on the fact that you could do that with batteries and basically provide the base cruise power plus some margin from the fuel cell, then the combination of the two technologies and the marriage of those two technologies, you can optimize. And it's different, for every platform. It's different for a fixed wing to a multi-rotor to an eVTOL aircraft. So if you can imagine, the green line that you see on the chart would be, your base cruise power. You can see that anything over and above this would be supplemented by your hybrid batteries. And then when the power level is below this, you could actually be charging the batteries in flight. And you can move that green line up and down, depending on what the duty cycle and power profile looks like. And so that's kind of the idea. So fuel cells, again, are good at providing specific energy, energy per unit mass or watt hours per kilogram. And batteries are good at providing specific power. So putting the two technologies together, you get the best of both worlds. And as I mentioned, you can optimize it for a given duty cycle. So this graph, I think, tells the whole story. And it's really a graph of specific energies. So you see energy up the y-axis and total power system mass. And this includes everything. So this is the fueling storage, the fuel, the hybrid battery, the fuel cell stack, and everything about the system. And really, it's a question of adding energy to the aircraft in a weight efficient manner. The slope of the red line is, as I mentioned earlier, 170 watt hours per kilogram. And it shows you the two different cases for an hour-long flight and an hour and a half long flight. And it shows you that, to add more energy to the aircraft, you actually add more batteries, and it's less efficient than adding fuel and storage. The green line is the gaseous hydrogen scenario at 700 bar. And it shows you again the difference between the 1 and the 1.5 hour flight. And effectively, the slope of that line is steeper than the red line. So it's fairly straightforward and understandable that you can add more energy to the aircraft by adding fuel and fuel storage. The yellow line assumes that the fueling system is liquid hydrogen. And because you can store liquid hydrogen in a more weight efficient way on board an aircraft, you can travel at a steeper slope. So it shows the different weights that the overall power system mass would end up being. For the liquid hydrogen scenario, I think there'd have to be a good reason why you would want to integrate that. You'd really need extended endurance because of the added complexity in the liquid hydrogen. Gaseous hydrogen, although you take a penalty from a weight perspective and a volume perspective, it's pretty easy to handle. And so for every fueling system, there'd have to be a really good reason why you would choose that one. And I'll note one thing: anything below around 100 kilowatt hours. So if you look at the lower left-hand corner of this graph, this is where batteries make sense, because you can see the red and the green line as they come down into the x-axis. We've got a situation where you have dead weight, you have no fuel, there's no energy. You have the weight of the fuel cell system, which can't do anything. So the argument there again is, if you have a need for around 100 kilowatt hours on an aircraft, it likely makes more sense to just put batteries in the aircraft. They're easy to manage. They're for that range, they're relatively fast to charge and so on. But it shows the opportunity as you need more range, as you need more endurance, where fuel cells bring an advantage. For charging time, again, it's based on the Tesla supercharger, but this shows you, the difference between an 1 hour flight and adding, 165 kilowatt hours on board the aircraft, whether it be in gaseous hydrogen red, liquid hydrogen green, or blue, the charge time, the estimated charge time of the battery packs. And you can see that, again, between the 1 hour flight and the 1.5 hour flight, there's, an impact, from a charge time perspective. So this is also a consideration. I think it's well known, and we talked about it earlier, our partnership with Universal Hydrogen, who's based in Hawthorne, California, at the airport there. And they're doing great work, and we're working in partnership with them to move forward as quickly as we can. And you see a picture of the subscale Iron Bird that was developed and run back in the March timeframe, and now they're moving forward with a larger version of an Iron Bird platform. The focus for this effort is really on a regional turboprop aircraft, namely the Dash 8-300 and ATR 42, and it's it's big, it's 2 megawatts per side from gross power perspective. And this will provide the aircraft upwards towards 1,000 kilometers. So you can imagine the technical challenges behind the development of this scale of power plant are steep. But again, we truly believe that it's based on the fundamental engineering of smaller systems and on-road transportation and all the other fuel cell systems that Plug has developed. We believe there's a path to success, to reduce the weight for these kind of applications and to make sense from an aviation hydrogen ecosystem perspective. But that's not the only place we're focusing. We're focusing not only on the aircraft and hydrogen, but on material handling on the ground at airports. And we think this is all part of the equation, as airports transform into various different kind of fueling opportunities, whether it be sustainable aviation fuel or hydrogen. I think each of those scenarios involves some ecosystem, right? And if there's hydrogen available at the airport, then the rest of the equipment can possibly operate on it as well. This is a good slide because our CEO, Andy Marsh, recently presented as well. And he said something that hit home for me, and I quote, he said, "This industry needs to be decarbonized." And Plug Power, with that said, also realizes that this deep decarbonization in aviation won't happen without green hydrogen, renewable green hydrogen, and we think that that is a very, very important part of this journey and this opportunity. So Plug Power, as such, is focusing on this as well. And to give you an idea of how we're going to do that, it's really got a lot to do with vertical integration. So as I mentioned, the 4 business units earlier, 2 of the business units are focused on producing renewable green hydrogen and producing electrolyzers to make that renewable green hydrogen. And plugged into the fuel cell activity, I think we'll close the loop on the whole ecosystem approach. So Plug's going to be involved with not only hydrogen generation, it's going to be involved with liquefaction, the logistics of moving the hydrogen and getting it to the customers, and obviously the customer equipment, fuel cell systems which are operating in all of these different applications. So part of that activity is to expand the network. And this is part of the rollout that's going to happen over the next 3-4 years. We're going to scale our opportunity to produce renewable green hydrogen, liquefy it, and transport it to our customers. So Plug Power is strategically locating plants across the US and into Canada to produce more hydrogen. And one of the opportunities there is to feed our own customers who are using our material handling systems. So the network will be developed, and this network will support multiple applications, not only our material handling customers, but eventually our aerospace customers as well. I talked a little bit about the gigafactory. Part of the challenge for Plug now is to scale, is to take this technology, fuel cells and hydrogen, and move forward to scale the effort to reduce costs. So part of this is this gigafactory in Rochester, New York, where a significant investment has been made by Plug Power, but it'll also create significant employment opportunities. There should be 375 jobs created. And what they're going to do at this gigafactory is produce stacks and electrolyzers for both electrolyzers and fuel cells. So that means up to 60,000 fuel cell stacks, at capacity a year, which translates into 7 million MEAs and bipolar plates, 2.5 gigawatts of output from a fuel cell perspective, 1 gigawatt of electrolyzers, all focused on renewable green hydrogen being used on site as well. So finally, I just wanted to leave you with this, because as I mentioned, Plug Power really believes in fuel cells for aerospace, but we realize that there's a huge mountain to climb from a technology development perspective, and things have to be light. And I think that's the theme that has to be left here is moving forward. There's opportunities in all of these different areas across the board. And the path to success is driving the weight out of the system, ensuring the systems are high performance and long lasting with high durability. And with that, I really believe that this technology, fuel cells and hydrogen, can be applied, first to these systems that you see on the slide, and maybe eventually up into medium range aircraft. And who knows, what the future holds going forward beyond 2030 and 2035. But it's a pretty exciting time, and personally, I'm pretty excited to be involved with it and move forward together with Plug Power and together with you, as a team and with everybody working on this effort. So I thank you very much for your attention, and I really welcome an open discussion, of the presentation material and any questions, of course, that may arise.
Thank you so much for that, Thomas. That was a fantastic presentation. I'm blown away by all of the things that Plug Power is involved in. I'll just go ahead and ask the first question, and then anybody that has any other questions, feel free to unmute yourself and ask them, or go ahead and put them in the chat if you don't want to talk, and I can read them, but it does tend to work better if you just unmute yourself and ask them yourself. Were you at our last presentation about methanol as hydrogen storage? And I'm really curious what your thoughts are on that versus liquid hydrogen storage.
Yeah, unfortunately, I wasn't able to participate in last month's, and you'd mentioned that earlier. And regarding methanol and fuel cells, it's not a new thing. And in fact, in my early days working in the fuel cell industry at Ballard, in late 90s, Ballard was working with Daimler primarily on methanol fuel cell systems for vehicles. And obviously there's a lot of energy that can be stored in liquid methanol, but it's the conversion of the methanol into, something you can pass through a fuel cell. So there's a reformer involved, there's this efficiency hit because of the reformer, and it's really like a chemical plant on board the vehicle, that would transform this liquid methanol into something usable. So the efficiency hit of doing that, plus the other, the other impacts such as durability to the fuel cell and poisoning and so on. At the end of the day, it just didn't make any sense, and I don't think it makes any sense for aviation either. Personally, I think if you can take pure hydrogen in the form of gas or in the form of liquid and use that, it just simplifies the fuel cell system dramatically, and that impacts cost, that impacts reliability and durability, and that's why I believe a lot of the automotive manufacturers who have fuel cell programs such as Toyota, Hyundai, have focused namely on high pressure hydrogen because it's easier to handle, and it makes the overall automotive fuel cell system simpler.
Thank you.
I'm just following up on that thought. Is there any paths to a green hydrogen reforming on wing, or does that really need to be a land-based system?
Yeah. It again comes back to overall system level simplification. And if you can store the hydrogen, in an easy, simple way, I don't know if you can afford the weight of I guess it comes down to the weight and what can you do in a weight efficient manner? Can you store, the fuel in the form of a liquid as methanol and convert it? I think it's been shown that the level of complexity and the weight of trying to do all of that doesn't compare with storing hydrogen, say in gaseous form at 6% weight storage, which is, standard for the automotive industry, and up to, 14 or 15% weight storage for liquid hydrogen. These are hard numbers to compete with, when it comes to overall weight of the fuel cell system.
Excuse me, Dave Edlund here at Element One. my company's been involved in methanol to hydrogen conversion for over a decade. I've been working in this sector for 30 years. Thomas, we almost overlapped a little bit at Ballard, and I worked on the Daimler program very closely on that.
Right.
I'd invite you, if you have time, to tune in next month, and I'll give you an update of our perspective on the opportunities. I think they're there for methanol to hydrogen conversion. Just like fuel cells aren't going to meet all of the applications. You pointed out correctly the pros and cons of fuel cell systems versus batteries. The same is going to be true for methanol to hydrogen conversion, but I do believe there's ample opportunity there, and I'm looking forward to sharing that with the group next month.
Thanks. I look forward to it. And, at the end of the day, I really don't think there's necessarily going to be one technology that meets all the applications. There may be specific situations or specific requirements that require something different. And we see that now with, on a higher level, battery technology for passenger vehicles versus fuel cell technology for passenger vehicles. And, fuel cells make a lot more sense for commercial applications that have high utilization and are used all the time, and honestly, I'm not sure it makes a whole lot of sense if you're just driving back and forth to work every day. It makes a lot more sense just to charge your vehicle overnight. So as we move forward and the incumbent technology, fossil fuel, or for aerospace, it's the gas turbine. But as this technology kind of gets pushed out, it likely won't just be replaced by one technology. I really believe there's room across the board for various applications, and so I really look forward to your presentation and learning more about what you guys do.
Yeah, again, this is Pat. If I could sort of seed an argument for our next meeting, Dave, if you could maybe bring some information related to, what are the like emissions, on-wing reforming, or I'm kind of muddling words here, but what is, for reforming, on the aircraft, what are the potential emissions floors, or, where can we really get to with that technology? And then, Tom, I'd love to hear your perspective real time on, the comparison of liquid hydrogen or gaseous hydrogen on wing and skipping that reforming step, and where we can get to from an emission standpoint. I would be particularly interested in hearing that discussion a little bit more deeply, as I haven't had the research contracts and that past perspective, and so hearing it from you two would be particularly enlightening.
Certainly, Patrick. I'll build that into the presentation. There's been a lot of studies published recently, and one pending public release through the Methanol Institute that point to some very encouraging results concerning emissions, and in particular CO2. So yeah, tune in next month, and I'll share that.
Thanks.
Anabov has a question. I see you're unmuted. Did you want to go ahead and ask it, or did you want me to read it?
Oh, I can go ahead and ask. I have a more important question, so I can supersede this. Hi, Thomas. So on behalf of the entire VFS, we are trying to come up with a requirements document for air taxis that is sensible and practical. I know you're involved with DOE, but they don't know VTOL. We know VTOL. And so is there any mechanism that we can adopt at a higher level with AHS that you can work with us? We have a tentative requirements document. The starting point could be we send you that and you tell us, we need somebody like you with the knowledge, which parts are realistic and which parts are infeasible.
Yeah, I'd be happy to give you some feedback on that, really to move the knowledge base forward. I'd certainly be happy to look that over and provide feedback based on kind of our experience and our specific focus. I'll help where I can.
And can you tell us, if I may follow on, Gabriel, so can you tell us how you interact with DOE? What's the right way for us to proceed engaging you in terms of VFS?
Engaging Plug Power or engaging DOE? I
No,
didn't
no,
understand this.
Plug Power.
So
You know, sometimes DOE puts out these numbers for air
yeah.
taxis, and we see a footnote that they're working with you. So we're trying to understand how can we work with you? What's the
I
mechanic?
see. Yeah. So Plugs, obviously Plugs focused on a bunch of different applications and industries, across the board. So there's a lot of different teams working with different representatives of DOE. But with regard to working with Plug, please use me as kind of the lightning rod. I can, if there's certain specific areas that I'm not directly involved with, I can route it to the right team or to the right people. So please, yeah, don't hesitate to reach out to me. Just drop me an email or whatever, and I'll help where I can.
Thank you. That's all.
Excellent question, Annabelle. Thank you for thinking of that. Does anybody else want to ask questions? Because if you don't, we have a few more minutes for Q&A, and hey, I'd be happy to keep asking Thomas questions, but I don't want to take over the whole meeting. I encourage you to tap Thomas's brain.
Well, I'm certainly in danger of taking over the Q&A. Tom, you mentioned, the complexity of storing the liquid hydrogen as compared to the gaseous hydrogen. And I just was wondering if you could provide a little bit more context on why you think storing liquid hydrogen is notably more complex than storing gaseous hydrogen and sending it through 6,000 PSI lines or whatever.
The liquid hydrogen is really, I think it's just a question of the storage state, the fact that the liquid is minus 253 degrees Celsius, it's continuously boiling off. So there's some logistics, and I shouldn't say it's overly complex, because Plug Power, like I showed you, uses over 40 tons of liquid hydrogen a day. That means on site of all of our distribution centers for Amazon and Walmart, there are massive liquid hydrogen tanks on site, and we're dispensing hydrogen to our filling stations and so on. So I'm just saying, in our experience, like an onboard fueling system for an aircraft, you would obviously have to consider those logistics, say in an eVTOL application. You could take advantage of the higher weight storage efficiency of a liquid hydrogen tank, right? Because it carries more hydrogen per volume, and it doesn't have to be pressurized. So these are lower pressure tanks, which gives you the opportunity to store hydrogen in the order of about 15% weight storage now, compared to say 6%. 700 bar hydrogen. So it's really is just a question of being able to handle the logistics of filling the onboard hydrogen storage systems versus a very well-known gaseous hydrogen. Gaseous hydrogen has been used and reliably across the board in automotive applications and in industrial applications and even in aerospace applications. And it's stable, so I think out of anything, that's probably the difference. You can take advantage of the higher percentage of the liquid hydrogen, but for gaseous hydrogen, it's stable. You can fill a tank and it can sit there for months, and you don't have to worry about it boiling off. And gaseous hydrogen regulators are very well known in industry and very safe. And that coupled with all of the standards development and requirements for aerospace applications, and of course safety has to be paramount. I really truly believe that there's a path, but I really think it's on a case-by-case basis. It's what does the aircraft have to do, what makes the most sense from a storage perspective, what's the payload, what's the range, all of these questions come into play.
A couple more questions in the chat. If you could pull up chart 15 or I don't know if it's slide 15 or chart 15. What are the tank weight fraction percents weight percent is the hydrogen weight divided by the tank weight? Or do you happen to know that offhand? I'm curious to see the
Yeah.
chart also. Yeah.
I'll pull it up.
Cool.
Let me just go back to that graph. I think this is the. Can everybody see that? Or I don't know if I shared my screen or not.
Oh,
Nope.
I need to unshare. Well, no, I'm not sharing. Okay, my bad. You should be able to share.
Okay, I'll share. So I think this is the one in question. So for the gaseous hydrogen scenario, I use 5.7% weight storage, which aligns with the Toyota Mirai, and what I think which is one of the most optimized, gaseous hydrogen, delivery systems available. And the yellow line is 14.7, which is just below 15%, which again has been done in a real world application. So that's what those refer to.
Thank you. Has Plug Power looked at ammonia as hydrogen vector for transport and storage of liquid versus liquid hydrogen?
Our CEO has talked about that, and his response was, our focus going forward will be, really on renewable green hydrogen, producing it where it makes sense to produce it, where there's cheap electricity, and transporting it, more locally than longer distances. So I don't know. My impression of what he said was that, ammonia wouldn't be part of our future necessarily. It would be more focused on renewable green hydrogen, liquefying it, and as you saw on the map of the US, strategically locating these plants so that they're close to customers.
Could you comment on the advantages of an 850 versus 700 bar pressurized tank standard?
Yeah, I think it's a good with universal hydrogen. I really believe it's just a function of volume, right? Because as you go higher in pressure, you can't necessarily make the tank lighter. It's still, but the advantage is that it can be a tiny bit smaller. So, we weren't, universal hydrogen is taking the lead on their pod development, which are both gaseous hydrogen at 850 bar and liquid hydrogen, of course. And, they're sizing those pods based on the aircraft, based on the space available in the aircraft. And that's how they chose to move forward, is the higher pressure.
Thanks so much.
It's not when you get up to that level of pressure for hydrogen, it's not an ideal gas. There are compressibility effects, right? So it's not linear. You don't get that much more kilograms of hydrogen when you go from 700 to 850 bar. It's there is an advantage, but it's not linear as you would hope. So you can't get much more hydrogen as you would think.
Perfect. We have time maybe for one more question. I want to encourage you all to stick around after the questions because I'd like to pull the audience on, and we've got some exciting upcoming announcements. So if anybody has a question, we've got time for one more.
Bruce.
Bruce, you're up.
Greetings, and thanks for your insightful sharing of what you're at and about in Plug Power. Just a couple of takeaways for me. One is the vertical integration is an important feature of your strategy, and we see a little bit of that here and there, but it looks like Plug is all in on that. So congratulations on that, Press.
Thanks.
Yeah, you bet. Look forward to future conversations. One sort of ethereal question, if you will. It's good to read this news out of the White House announcement. It didn't carry the weight of a presidential review directive, the sort of which developed some years ago in promoting things like commercial space and so on and so forth. Where do you see as an industry leader the need to apply industrial consensus pressure, whatever you want to call it, on policymakers and implementers at the well, it's at the government level, but it winds up affecting industry. I mean, where can we put our shoulder to the wheel in your observation? I mean, if you have some thoughts about that now, great. If later, that'd be fine too.
Our general counsel, who's a executive vice president, Jerry Conway at Plug Power, is actively involved with, you know, going to the white, you know, basically going to get tax credits and to ensure tax credits remain in place. And this is across the board, you know, not only, you know, for renewable green hydrogen projects and things like that, but also for transportation applications. And I see a natural progression, you know, as things move forward, and especially with the document that was just shown from the White House earlier. I think, you know, that's a natural progression for Plug Power to get involved with, is you know, making sure that policy is developed with all of these different applications in mind, because there's opportunity across the board. So I will say, you know, Plug Power is already actively involved with these activities.
Yeah, great, good news. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, thank you so much for that amazing presentation. Do you all see the agenda?
Yes.
Okay, it's not, it doesn't have the green outline like it usually does when I'm sharing, so I couldn't tell if I was sharing the correct screen. But yeah, Thomas, fantastic presentation. Thanks so much. So wanted to just touch on our next speakers. For October, we have Jeff Budd from OMB, and I'm not sure, you know, how many of you are familiar with what they do, but they do a lot of valves and sort of connecting all of the pieces, something that we often tend to forget about, but I think it's going to be really insightful. And they've been in the aerospace space for quite a while, so should be really informative. And then November, we have Dave Edlund, who asked a couple questions today. So from Element One, and so that'll be an exciting conversation to kind of, you know, take that forward, and curious to see what they work into the presentation for next, for November's speech presentation. I can't talk this morning. So the exciting news is I wanted to kind of pull the audience and ask, just put a 1 for yes and a 2 for no, if in the chat, if you're going to transformative vertical flight in January. And if you're not going, or if you don't know what it is, put a 0. But if you will be there in person, please put a 1. If you will not be there, put a 2. If you don't know what it is, put a 0. Okay, interesting. Lots of zeros. Not very many ones, some ones. Okay, so I will go ahead and say, I don't know if Mike or Jim are still on. You'll do it more justice than I will. But if you're not on, I can take a stab at it. So yay,
I'm
Mike's
here,
on.
Danielle. Sorry. Struggling again here. Let me
No worries.
let's see if I can move the screen back over here. So the Transformative Vertical Flight Conference in January is in San Jose. So this is our 9th annual eVTOL Symposium. And it's hosted by the San Francisco Bay Area chapter of VFS, which is primarily, well, it's supported by the NASA and Army rotorcraft community at Ames. And, you know, there's the technical presentations, the technical talks, the technical papers, and then we always have the symposium in parallel with that. And in the past, we've had discussions on hydrogen. But anyway, Danielle, was that a good intro for you?
Yeah, that's perfect. And you know, it's educational, it's fantastic networking. It's kind of like what I would say, sort of the who's who in the eVTOL space. Yes, it's transformative vertical flight, but it tends to kind of be dominated by the eVTOL folks, since that is transformative vertical flight. And I will be there for sure. And so, excuse me, Mike and I have been talking about doing an in-person, an annual in-person hydrogen council meeting during transformative vertical flight. This January will celebrate 1 year of our hydrogen council. I'm extremely proud of everything that we've accomplished this year, and how much momentum we've gotten. And I think it could be super to meet in person, maybe for a couple hours. I don't know if we want to do a half day, but it would be included in you wouldn't have to pay to go. It would be included in you coming to the conference. But I thought, we could all meet in person, we could brainstorm, and I would start it out by doing like a high level presentation summarizing everything that we've learned from this year's speakers. And then we could sort of say, okay, this is everything we've learned. This is what, brainstorm on, this is still what we need to learn, and sort of identify, what we want to accomplish in 2022. So with that said, would any of the zeros potentially change to a 1? And Mike, do you know the price of that? I know you know the price. I don't. Or Annabelle, do you know the price of that conference? I can't remember.
So I'll put the, so here's the website. Okay, it says vtol.org/evtol 2022. And I have to go there. Oh, it didn't make a link. I have to go there so I can look, but it's got the pricing on there.
Okay.
And we are expecting, to be fully in person, subject to change.
Oh, and the museum thing.
yeah.
So yeah, do you want to talk to that? Because that's going to be something I think you just don't want to miss.
Yeah, so a couple things. I mean, in the past we've gotten 600 people. We'll see what it is this time. We'll probably limit attendance just so don't get too crowded in there. We have a short course planned for the Monday beforehand, and on the Friday afterwards, we're having a reception at the Hiller Aviation Museum a few miles away at San Carlos Airport, and we're planning to have several eVTOL aircraft there. Still kind of TBD as far as which ones there'll be, but we should have that probably finalized here in the next several weeks. It's actually Jim Sherman that does all the orchestration. Like I said, he's on our infrastructure workshop, but this is the big event in the eVTOL world every year. And this past year was virtual, but we're looking forward to getting back in person again.
All right. So with that said, thank you, Annabelle, for posting the price. So 700 for VFS members, 800 for non-members. Super reasonable considering the quality of what you're getting. So with that said, would anybody that was a 0 that didn't know what it is be interested in attending in person? And the reason I'm asking is, we're trying to decide if building in an in-person hydrogen council meeting into this would be valuable. Would you all come? And I don't know, maybe if we had at least, I don't know, 10 to 20, that would be certainly enough for me, but of course we would like a lot more than that. So with that said, now that we've kind of told you a little bit about it, if you were a 0, and would you now consider being a 1? This isn't a commitment or anything, just go ahead and throw a 1 in the chat if you're interested in going.
I'm a 0. I'm a full-blooded 0, and by trying.
Well, a 0 is that you don't know what it is. A 2 is that you weren't going to go.
2. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay.
2. Yeah. Mike and Vertical Flight Society has a lot on its plate for the events that they've been doing for almost 9 years here. I think we should have something totally independent. I think it should be totally virtual. I had a very good conversation with people involved with AIAA who did the EATS event. And I think the big thing that, and I think it was Darmstadt or somebody raised the question, maybe it was Mike Holmes, The big deal is that the DOE doesn't know about airplanes, and the guys who do airplanes don't know what DOE's got spending billions on. And I really think the focus that we uniquely are the halfways between the both sides. So we should, the hydrogen version of VTOL should invite a whole bunch of people from DOE to participate and from AIAA who have nothing to do with vertical flight, but who actually understand the advantages that we've just heard from Thomas. Thomas, you've done the greatest presentation I've seen in a very long time. I hope you're hiring old men, 80-year-old men who want to help you.
Thank you, Bud. That's
I would work for a few gallons of liquid hydrogen. And in fact, I would take the liquid hydrogen and put it in a tank that I designed and give it to you for free. Everybody knows it. It'll be free only to Plug Power. But the trick is, I think it should be virtual. If there's no enthusiasm within Vertical Flight Society, I would be happy to host a virtual event with the objective of having 200 or 300 people showing up from scattered all over the place who should be talking to each other, who have yet to talk to each other. As Thomas understands, it really is two different worlds. You got to understand electrolyzers, and you've got to understand tanks that fit in airplanes. And
but if I may, those are valid points that you make, but the key thing I think that I want to focus on is, number one, Vertical Flight Society was instrumental and critical for us forming this council. So it is a council through Vertical Flight Society. And then second, we can sort of tag off of the event that's already planned because we're all volunteer. And so we don't have resources to really put together our own individual event. Now, there's no reason we can't invite others from the outside to this event. Or maybe the event would be partly, us discussing, who those key people are and who could introduce us to them. But at this time, I don't think we have the time or resources to organize an independent event. And, that's my take.
I fully agree, and I don't think it should be Vertical Flight Society. This group that we are part of could be the helpful sponsors of something, but not bury it into all the other stuff that Vertical Flight Society has on its plate, including helicopters that go 400 miles an hour. There's what we're into is a very, very, very important breakthrough. Vertical flight and hydrogen, and liquid hydrogen preferably, and that should have its own platform. And getting everybody to go out to California or someplace. I'm not going to California because I'm not getting on an airplane with the crazies. So I want virtual, and the guys at AIAA thought it was a good idea to have a virtual session that's done much better than what I've ever seen by Department of Energy or anybody else. But I'll shut up, and I just want Bruce Holmes to jump in there. He's all.
If I could just say, if I could just interrupt for a minute. So I think what I understand that Danielle is proposing is a working group meeting of the council to, the objective of the council is to really understand the state of the art and then come up with a roadmap and action plan to help realize that. And I think having a large, virtual event, we've had, large virtual events with hundreds or more than 1,000 people. So that's certainly possible, but I think for this event, what Danielle's proposing is a working group meeting specifically to help further the council.
Sure, exactly. Thanks, Mike. And it's more, I would rather there be 10 people that are really ready to put their pencil to the paper, contribute, let's make a plan, this is what we've done, this is what we're going to do, versus 200 people that are kind of all have different visions. I think just to meet some of you wonderful people in person that I've been talking to for a year, and build some camaraderie in the community, and then also develop a really strategic plan. And I'll also add, Bud, if this helps you feel better, this is something that I'm taking on, so it's not going to add to the list of things that Mike and Jim have to do. This would be, and if you like how the council has been run so far, you could expect that, and then some in person. So, and we're thinking it could be offered virtually as well, but personally, for me, I would just rather it be just a straight up in person. But we can keep discussing that. But anyway, just kind of wanted to throw that out there. So
Yeah,
I
does
won't-
anybody else want to
I
weigh in?
won't be there. I won't be there.
let me add a
Fair
thought.
enough.
So I'm a bit of a fan of and rather than or. The agenda for that face-to-face opportunity, I suggest, can be wrapped around the idea of something of a facilitated strategy discussion. And the product of that strategy discussion will be strategic initiatives and an execution management plan that I strongly suspect and would be very supportive of would include creating a venue, an action at a venue that may be more toward the end that you were both mentioning, which is, where are those who understand both aerospace, all aerospace, rotorcraft, hydrogen in all forms in the full vertical, and policy needed to move action forward. Right now, I have to say I'm encouraged by the White House announcement. I'm less than enthusiastic about how well our country is moving the hydrogen messaging and actions forward compared to other countries around the world. We really would benefit from action on that, and to the extent that we can find alignment between the various players, many of whom are, of course, on this council, so much the better, and have that conversation around strategy. There are probably other values. Danielle, you point out one, which is the socialization that we've all been missing over the past coming on a couple of years here, not too distant future. So I would make an effort to be out there. There are plenty of reasons I need to be in that part of the world anyway. I need my own private jet, but we'll talk about that later. Thanks.
Hey, we're working on it. We're working on getting that on-demand air taxi travel for all. So
That's what we need. All right.
Yeah, thank you for those comments. And I couldn't agree more. Something that, we discussed in our white paper was how alarming we sort of graphed out the plans of what China, Germany, can't remember, Japan, and the US, and there probably were a couple more, but those are the top four that I remember. And if you look at, their plans and the budgets going towards building out the hydrogen infrastructure, the United States currently right now, I think, is second, but in the next, I think by 2030, they'll be last. And with Germany and China, Germany totally dominating and China being second, and the US falling, barely even showing up on the graph. And I think it could be valuable for us to, maybe go to Congress. I remember a YouTube video I watched a couple years ago where I can't remember who it was from Bell. It might even have been Scott Drennan. I don't remember, but it may have been the CEO. But Jaewon Shin and a couple of other people went to Congress and really pitched eVTOL and flying taxis. And I'm sure most of you are, if you're not familiar with it, I encourage you to find it. It was really enlightening. But maybe putting together a group like that where we go to Congress and say, like, this is why we need to do this. This is why it's important. This is how it benefits society, the country, yada, yada, yada. But, we also have people from the UK and other countries. And so I don't want this to just be the US. I would love to see some of our friends in the UK be able to make it to this event. But I do think that should probably be one of the top priorities. Thoughts?
Yeah, so I think to summarize, we should absolutely get together in the January conference. Mike is going to make it happen. If we can't find space, we'll sit in the coffee shop or in the parking lot. But
We
I'm
already found space. Yeah. We did. And also, if just FYI, we were talking about if you weren't wanting to attend the entire conference, you could just pay to go just to this. But they do need to, if it were a perfect world, we would do it for free, but we have to pay for the banquet room and all that sort of thing. So you can do just that if you just want to go to that meeting. And personally, I think it'd be really cool to have maybe like a social time as well. Like maybe we meet for a couple hours and then, we all have a beer or something like that. And I don't know how that funding would work, but I definitely would need to talk to Mike about that. But, I would love to, meet you all in person and just, get to know you a little bit better than our virtual avatars. So
and yeah, and for the meeting itself, we wouldn't charge you to come to at all. We wouldn't charge you at all
Okay.
to come to a meeting room and really do work.
Okay, cool.
But yeah, but we would love people to come and register for the conference. A week long of, eVTOL extravaganza.
Yeah, it's definitely worth going, especially for that museum thing. So okay, so there you have it. You can come and you can attend for free, but it would be well worth your money to attend the whole conference. I can attest to that. It is probably my favorite event of the year. All right, Mike, you're unmuted. Michael, did you have something, or did you mean to unmute yourself?
No, we're just coming up on the hour.
Yep, wrapping up. So that's really it. Also, the infrastructure workshop is going on right now for Vertical Flight Society. If you're not attending that, you might want to check it out. And Mike Hirschberg, if you had any other last VFS announcements that you wanted to mention.
Yeah, a couple things. So I just posted in the chat the link to the video of the congressional hearing that Danielle was mentioning. It took me a little bit, took me a minute because I didn't have it tagged correctly. But anyway, there's a link. Another thing to realize is that our annual forum is in May, planned to be in Fort Worth. We have a open call for papers for those who are willing and able to write technical papers. The deadline is October 11th. And of course, we have an eVTOL technical committee that Anubhav Datta leads. And then also many of the topics may also be applicable for our 21 other technical areas. So check that out on our website, vtol.org. And we hope that those interested in writing technical papers will check out our call for papers. And just as always, thanks to Michael and Danielle and our speaker this month, Thomas, and everybody who's joined in today to discuss and ask questions. This is really just a great group, and really, kind of in awe of this group and what you guys are doing. It's really great to see.
Oh, thank you so much, Mike.
Thanks, Michael.
All right. With that, I will go ahead and wrap up. I encourage you, if you're not a member of Vertical Flight Society, become a member of Vertical Flight Society. You can access these recordings, the slides,